Welcome to episode 411 of the Reformed Brotherhood. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Tony, and we are proud members of the Society of Reformed Podcasters.
Oh, if the sky comes falling down for you, there's nothing in this world I wouldn't do.
Hey, brother.
Hey, brother. So we get to talk about the church today.
I know.
I'm pretty stoked about that. I mean, and in addition, because we're looking at the church through the perspective of the Scots Confession, it means we get to use words like Kirk and not refer to like a dude.
Right. Or to Doug Wilson.
Yes, that's true.
It's true. It's true. There will be no references apart from this one now, just this moment, to Doug Wilson for the rest of the episode.
You had me at no references.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. This is fantastic. So that's coming. I'm always excited to talk about the church. And there's a lot in this little section here that is to love, to meditate on, to search out. So again, if you want to come hang out with us, and I think you should, pull over your vehicle, get yourself a copy of the Scots Confession online and track with us, especially as you're about to hear it in your ears as it's read to you shortly. But of course, before we do that, we have this tradition around here where we take a little bit of time, just a little bit, to affirm or deny something on each episode. So the big question I have for you, brother, is are you affirming with or denying against?
I'm going to keep my streak, I think it's a streak, of being positive. So I'm affirming something today.
Okay.
And for the listener who's been with us for any amount of time, they know that I'm a sucker for like a good a cappella or a good choral arrangement of something.
That's true.
And every once in a while, I think YouTube knows this about me, and it will serve up some sort of like a cappella group or some sort of nice choral arrangement or something. This is how I stumbled upon like Cimarelli, which is a group of sisters that does really fun kind of like poppy girl pop music, but they do lots of covers, which is fun. And the other day I was taking a quick break at work and I popped on YouTube just to see if there's anything interesting going on. And I came across a cover of a song by Owl City, which I'll just say like this might surprise people, but I really enjoy Owl City. And it's probably his most famous song is Fireflies. And it's by a guy named Jared Haley. Have you ever heard of this guy?
No.
So this is one of those videos where like you open the video and it's divided into a bunch of squares. You can tell that the guy is going to be singing like a bunch of parts, all the parts. So if you've ever heard the song Fireflies, which you haven't, if you haven't, you really should go listen to the original before you go listen to this guy's, because one of the things about Owl City is it's all synth. It's all like synthesized. If you go to an Owl City concert, it's basically like one dude up front with a keyboard and a synthesizer, and like everything is all put together. So there's a lot of parts. Usually I won't say it's very musically, it's musically complex in that it's a lot of parts. It's not like, you know, probably not winning like awards. Like people aren't going to be listening to Owl City in like 100 years. We're not talking about Beethoven or anything like that, but it's fun, poppy music. There's lots of different parts. It's usually pretty upbeat. The guy is actually a Christian, so many of his songs have good, like overt Christian overtones and explicit Christian statements in them. This guy, there are parts of the song, and you've heard the song Fireflies, right, Jesse?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think most people
have, even if you don't realize it, you certainly heard it. There was a summer where like all it was Owl City and Fireflies. There's parts of this song where if you close your eyes, it's hard to tell that you're not actually listening to the original, which is really impressive when you think about the fact that it's one dude with his voice doing all the parts. And on top of that, a cappella is already really challenging, right? It's hard to sing on pitch. It's hard to maintain a pitch. A cappella groups that are now making songs and are having to replicate things like drums and other instruments with their voices, that's complicated in a whole different way. But now when you add in the fact that this guy can only sing one part at a time, so he had to go in and sing the first part and then had to go back and redo the second part and layer it on top of itself. And now he had to do it on a way that the video is appealing and actually makes sense and is interesting to watch. It really is just a testament to this guy's skill and his craft. I don't know anything about this guy. He does all sorts of covers. There's no indication that he is or isn't a Christian. I have no idea. He's got a 10-year-old kid that comes in and does videos with him too, which is pretty cool. So go check it out. You can either listen to it. You may even want to think about listening to it first before you watch the video, just to get an idea of how like complicated it is. You'll see how much more complicated it is when you watch the YouTube, because you see him kind of pop in and out of these 16 frames. I think it's 16 frames. I didn't count, but 16 frames that he has on the screen. He pops in and out of them as the different vocal tracks layer. And I'm assuming most people have seen an a cappella video of this nature. Usually there's not this many tracks. I think most of them are like 5 to 6 like segments or 5 to 6 layers. But dude is just a master of his craft. It's really good. All of his songs are really great. This is probably my favorite one that I've seen. So it's Fireflies by Owl City. It's an a cappella cover by Jared Haley, Halley. You can get it on Spotify or Apple if you want to go listen to it just for straight up music. But I would say you definitely go watch the video on YouTube. It's really, really fun.
To me, it seems like the voice is just this like underrated and underappreciated part of creation. Don't you think?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Because we talk about, especially when there's any kind of debate about evolution and creationism, I think the eye gets pulled in, just the eye itself, the mechanisms, all its construction, and even all those Darwin quotes about like how he feared the eye because he himself recognized there's something there that seemed to transcend even like his own theories, which were wild. But the voice is like this amazingly complex thing. And if you've ever had like problems with your voice, either you've just been sick temporarily or like you've had some kind of serious complication, the vocal cords, the voice box is just insanely constructed. It really is. And to get like this much sound, that much pitch and range out of something that is like basically like flesh guitar strings in your throat to which you're passing air, there's like no other way to say it. It's a remarkable thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I really love, like the interesting thing too, is like using your voice is one of those things, particularly when you're singing. It's hard to even conceptualize like the mechanism, like
what's happening.
If you like had to think about how all of this was happening at the same time, you couldn't do it. I mean, there's a lot of things in the human experience that we couldn't actually explain and couldn't like break down into component parts easily and like replicate. So like I was thinking about one time I was playing softball in a church league. Unfortunately, this was prior to my understanding of Sabbatarianism, so this was a Sunday afternoon. We were playing softball in a church league, and I was playing outfield, and I was struck. This wasn't great for the game, but I was struck literally in the middle of a play about the fact that like the ball gets hit, it goes on a certain arc and a trajectory, and without really thinking about it a lot, I'm doing complicated like instinctive calculations in my head to be able to understand with the arc where the ball is going to land. Like it's not a straight line. It goes up, it goes down. It's got all of that stuff. And if you were to ask me to actually like, I'm sure there are people that could do it, but if you were to ask me to try to calculate that using mathematics, I would not be able to do it. I wouldn't have any way to do it. And all this happens in a split second in your brain. You just instinctively are able to see where the ball is going. That's not just like, it's not just an instantaneous knowledge. Like there's a process happening in your brain, or like walking or running or all of those things. It just really is a testament to God's design, and the voice, like thinking about how you elevate your pitch. It's really like you're thinking it, and your vocal folds are just doing it. There's no like, right. It's not like I can consciously think about where to move my hand. I can't consciously think about like the structure of my vocal folds and how to do that. It's just you just do it. So anyway, check it out. Fireflies by Owl City. It's a cover by Jared Haley. He's got lots of fun covers. I am particularly fond of the Pokemon theme song that he does with his 10-year-old son, and it's just a hoot. It's really, really fun. So check him out. Give him a like, a subscribe, whatever they do on the YouTube these days. I don't even know. And then, like I said, if you like those jams and you want to listen to it, it's available on all like your streaming music platforms, Spotify, Apple, probably Google Music, if anybody uses Google Music anymore. I don't even know. Amazon. Who else has streaming music? Everybody. We have our own streaming music now, right? Everybody's got streaming music. Just put it on your own private streaming music server, whatever. We don't actually have streaming music. That's probably never going to happen. Someday, maybe. Someday.
I'm going to sneak in here with a voice affirmation that I think I may have dropped like many, many episodes ago, but since you brought it up, I think it's worthwhile mentioning the best book I've ever read on voicing. And this is a book for everybody. So if God has given you and gifted you with the ability to speak, and I just mean like the ability to make sound, you should definitely pick up this book called Set Your Voice Free by Roger Love. It's a whole treatment of first, like the power of voice in communication and expression, both musical and otherwise, just speaking. This book like rocked my world. And there's still techniques I use in this to this day. In fact, I have to give some presentations this coming week. And I was thinking about this book again and how to do that. Even the way in which I start the episode was that the tone I actually use is crafted by Roger Love. And the idea here is that, like you said, the voice is magnificent. It's something that's created that is exceptional. And there are certain things that we respond to in the voice, like its rise and fall. It makes us feel a particular way. So all of that, I'm just saying, go and read it. No matter what you do in life, I think you'll find this book to be really, really helpful. He also pretty much gives this kind of, like he lays on this gauntlet that basically says, everybody can sing. Yeah. It's just a matter of training your voice. And he even has techniques in this to help you do that. So if you're interested in improving your voice or just want to learn more about it, this is a man, for as much as I know, is not a Christian, but he's a professional voice trainer. He talks about training all kinds of celebrities. He's going to name drop on you, but it just goes to show that like he actually is very skilled at this craft. And all he's doing is really leaning into this. He's giving the proper appreciation that we're talking about to the voice, and then saying there's so many things that can be done with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jesse, what are you affirming or denying today?
I'm also going to affirm with. So, and this is just like pure fun. I mean, sometimes it's just fun, right? You want an affirmation that just hits you in the place where it's super fun. So I love like these little like perspective tests online, and I've just sent it to Tony. So he's going to take it. He didn't know about this, but he's going to take it while I'm talking to you all. And what I'm affirming with is this fun little visual perspective test, perception test, that judges what you call blue and green and compares it.
This isn't fair, though.
With others. It might not be, but that's why I want to have you take it. So all you do is if you go to this website, it's just ismy.blue, ismy.blue. And what you do is you just answer a couple of questions on screens. Is this green? Is this blue? And then what it does is there's this whole distribution of these results, and it plots you across that distribution. So I took this thing, and again, like you're just seeing a couple screens, and you just simply asked to respond, is it green or is it blue? And here are my results. So it says I don't know if this is good or bad. This is interesting to me. My boundary hue is at 157. So again, go to the website, understand what I mean. My boundary hue is at 157. What that means apparently is it's greener than 98% of the population. So for me, turquoise is blue. That's what I've learned. I found this test like kind of difficult in the sense that it moves you, of course, in increasing levels of that transparency between the two colors. And you have to answer that. But if you look at me in the distribution, I'm like way to the left. So apparently for me, turquoise is blue, and I'm like turquoise biased. So what say you? What are your results?
Boundary is at hue 173, which is greener than 63% of the population. And for me, turquoise is also blue. So, but what would be really interesting for this, though, I would love for this to expand to other colors too. So the reason I say this isn't fair, and Jesse knows this, but the listener probably doesn't, is I'm actually red-green colorblind. And so for me, it'd be interesting for me to try to think through whether I was choosing blue because I was assuming I wasn't seeing it correctly, right? So like there's not only is there the physical bias that your eye sees things differently, but also like how much of the fact that I know that I don't see colors the same way other people do plays into this. I think I was probably more likely to say something was blue, even if I thought it was green, because I assumed that I was seeing it incorrectly. I suppose like that might be the point too. Like what's incorrectly.
Exactly.
These are arbitrary words and labels that we put on here. So this is actually really interesting too, because it's a fairly well-known fact that like the ancient Greek word to describe the color of the sky is the same word as green, or it's related to the word green. Yes. So like this actually like plays into that blue and green. We know blue and green are related colors. I'd also be interested to hear how people who are yellow-blue colorblind, how this comes out for them.
It would be super interesting. I haven't found yet if there is another version of this for other colors. But what's odd in this is like I'm more green than you, or I'm more blue than you.
Yeah.
Which is weird. I have no idea why that happened. I've done this like multiple times.
You get the same thing.
Yeah, I'm in a range. Even if I try to to cheat, to be honest, because I have like this, there's this, so I don't know why this is. There's this moral compunction to be like,
yeah,
I can't pull myself away from saying that looks blue or that looks green. So it's just fun. So is my dot blue, take it, go to make your friends and loved ones and family take it. And then you guys can just compare your results. But look at the internet, just providing strange things to test.
Yeah, I just ran through it again, and not trying to cheat the test. I mean, you could obviously just cheat the test by saying everything is blue, but with the knowledge of what the test is doing, and I still got your boundary is at hue 176, bluer than 68% of the population. So, which is pretty. I mean, that's pretty dang close to what I was at the first time. Right. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I would love it if the listener would go take this, then join our Telegram chat and let us know what happens and what your score was. Let's do hashtag blue in the Telegram chat. Hashtag blue. That way we can track the results and see what happens. I think that'll be fun.
I think if you take it, you'll find like, or at least for me, I don't know how you felt. Like the first two are easy. You're like, okay, that's definitely one color. And then of course they move you along. And you're like, oh man, is that like robin's egg? Like, you're thinking of like all these color palettes. I'm just thinking of paint swatches I've seen.
Oh yeah.
And that's trying to identify.
That's like my worst nightmare. If you put me in a room with a bunch of paint swatches and getting out of there alive relied on getting the colors correctly, I'm all done.
It's dangerous.
I think even for most people who aren't colorblind, it's all done. Like most people, this is another one of those mysterious things of God's creation is like, yes, the color, the names of colors that we associate with or we assign to colors is arbitrary, more or less. But like the light hitting your eye, even that's not fully objective. Right. Because like there's color blindness, there's differences in the ways that our eyes receive light. There's differences in the shape of our eyes, the room that you're in. So like, I wonder how this obviously is not like a super ultra scientific controlled test because like of course people have filters on their computer and stuff, but it'd be interesting to see how this same test plays out in a really strong controlled environment. I'm sure that this online test is built based on some sort of actual scientific study that was done with a controlled environment, but yeah, I would love to see this for other colors.
Yeah, in fact, you can submit your results if you want to. Yeah. They're anonymous until you submit them theoretically. And you're asked for both your language and then you're asked, are you colorblind? Yeah. And what kind of color blindness do you have? It also gives the disclaimer, this is not a diagnostic tool.
It's true.
So if you were looking for something to really tell you if you were blue-green colorblind or some combination, this is not that thing, but it is super fun.
Yeah, can I indulge the podcast in a brief story? Just a funny story about colorblindness.
You have the floor,
I think that you've heard this story before, but I found out that I was colorblind at a relatively young age. I think I was like 1 or 2 years old, or first or second grade, not 1 or 2 years old. That's crazy. First or second grade, and at least the kind of colorblindness I have is hereditary, but it's passed down on the mother's side, and it's not recessive, but it's carried on the X chromosome. So like. Your mother can only ever be a carrier. They can't be actually colorblind. So yeah, it must be recessive. So it's on the X, and since they don't have two X's, they can't have anyway, the terrible genetics lesson just there.
Here we go.
But I found out at a very young age, so I was kind of like aware of this and what it meant and all of this stuff. And I was in like middle school, and I had this pair of khaki shorts that I just loved. I wore them. It was like I would wear them until they were so dirty that I couldn't get away with wearing them anymore. And then I would wait by the washing machine when they come out. I don't know why I love these pants so much. Just love these khaki pants. And I went to school one day, and my some kid that I don't know if I was beefing with him or something like that, but he's like, "Well, yeah, you and your pink shorts." And I was like, "What are you talking about, you idiot?" And then I went home and I was like, "Mom, this dude was making fun of my khaki shorts. He said they were pink." And she was like, "Oh, honey, they are pink." I was like, you let me go to school in pink shorts? So yeah. Colorblindness is weird because it's not what most people think it is. Yeah. Most people think that people who are colorblind just see like black and white or shades of gray. And there is a form of colorblindness that's like that, but that's not the way most people see. Most people, it manifests in like you are not able to tell the difference between certain colors.
Right.
So like a red-green person, the part of my eye that sees the difference between red and green misfires. So sometimes instead of firing red, it fires green. So what happens is if the difference between two colors is red or green, when my eye misfires, it's going to get those wrong. So it would very rarely happen on pure red or pure green, whatever that means. But like in this case, the difference between blue and green. My color blindness is probably not playing into this all that much, except that a color that has green in it, like a blue green fusion, if my eye is firing red on that instead of green, or the parts of my eye that fire, it probably would lead me to see that as more blue, because I'm not seeing the green part of it. I'm seeing probably something closer to purple. So yeah, I also thought that the color of the Minnesota Vikings team was dark blue for most of my life until I was corrected.
In terms of purple?
Yeah, it's definitely purple. I mean, it's a pretty like bluish purple, but it's
dark.
It is dark, but I thought it was blue.
Like what kind of blue?
Yeah. Like green. I thought it was green, actually. It's turquoise. I thought it was turquoise.
We have no references anymore. That's great. So the real question is, after all that, is like right now, as it stands, how many pairs of like salmon shorts or pants do you own?
I don't know. Your sister is pretty on top of my wardrobe. So I think if I brought home a pair of salmon shorts, she'd probably catch me on that. I do have a pink shirt that your mother bought me for midwinter no reason one time. And I have a pair of bright red corduroys that I really like.
So the answer is you have no idea.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe they're all.
They're all there. Yeah. I've never actually seen you wear anything that was truly khaki. It's always been pink.
I'm wearing salmon shorts right now. Everything I own is salmon.
That's great. Honestly, that's kind of like high end for that, like, elementary school. You know what I mean? Like maybe you were also wearing boat shoes and stepped off a yacht. I have no idea. You might have been like right on the vibe. With that.
Yeah. No, I was way ahead of the game. Whatever I was wearing is probably super stylish now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's pretty classy. Like probably you were wearing those shorts with like a white woven belt.
Yeah, it probably was not super classy in the early 1990s or mid 1990s.
Did you have a monocle?
I did have a monocle.
Well, yeah, then it's all together. Yeah, it makes complete sense now.
Yeah. Anywho.
I have no segue. I was reaching for every segue.
I know. I'm really thinking how we do this. I wore, where I wore those shorts as well.
Here we go.
To church.
The Kirk.
To the Kirk. Yes, to the Kirk.
Shorts to the Kirk. Honestly, that I think is an epic outfit for the Kirk right there. But let's talk about the Kirk.
Yeah, let's have a podcast campaign that is make the Church of Kirk again. It'd be like macaca. I don't know.
I was so worried that was going to draw too close to some kind of political stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're talking about the church. We've been working through this ongoing series in the Scots Confession. For those of you who haven't listened to the rest of this series, I really would encourage you to go back. Not necessarily because this content won't make sense apart from the rest of it, but we really would just love for you to listen to everything we have. But there is a certain level of dependence on the previous chapters. And although we're not building an argument in like the classic sense, all that we've talked about in the Scots Confession so far is going to play into our background and our context. So for example, the most important thing is that the Scots Confession, by and large, defines the people of God, defines the church as those who are inheritors to the promise of God. Right. So if we haven't talked about the promise of God or the continuance or perseverance of the church, then some of what we are going to talk about in this chapter may not make as much sense. This chapter is not as sort of like interestingly connected as some of the others that we have. And it is, again, we're kind of back in that arena where this is just good old fashioned vanilla Reformed theology. But It's always interesting. There's always some good things to come out of here. And it's always worth revisiting some of these classic confessions. This confession predates the Westminster Confession. It is a kind of a different flavor, and it's an English confession in terms of like English speaking language on the United Kingdoms, although I don't think it was called the United Kingdoms. It was like the ununited kingdoms. But it was on the British Isles. But it is much more influenced by continental theology and Calvin specifically than you'll see in some of the later confessions, because Knox spent so much time as a refugee in Geneva and learned from Calvin directly. So it's really, really worth revisiting and thinking through these confessions. So I'm going to read this chapter. It's not as long as some of the ones that we've had. And so I'll read the whole thing, and I think we'll be edified by it here. So it's chapter 16 of the Kirk. And it reads, as we believe in one God, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, so we must constantly believe that from the beginning there has been, now, and to the end of the world will be, a kirk. That is to say, one company and multitude of men chosen of God, who rightly worship and embrace him by true faith in Christ Jesus, who is the only head of the same kirk, which also is the body and spouse of Christ Jesus. Which kirk is Catholic, that is universal, because it contains the elect of all ages, all realms, nations, and tongues, be they of the Jews or of the Gentiles, who have communion and society with God the Father and with his Son, Christ Jesus, through the sanctification of his Holy Spirit. Therefore, it is called the communion, not of profane persons, but of saints, who as citizens of the heavenly Jerusalem have the fruition of the most inestimable benefits, to wit, of one God, one Lord Jesus, one faith, and one baptism, out of which kirk there is neither life nor felicity. And therefore we utterly abhor the blasphemy of those that affirm that men who live according to equity and justice will be saved whatsoever religion they have professed. For as without Christ Jesus there is neither life nor salvation, so will none be participant thereof, but such as the Father has given unto his Son Christ Jesus. And in those in time come to him, avow his doctrine, and believe in him. We comprehend the children with the faithful parents. This kirk is invisible, known only to God, who alone knows it, whom he has chosen, and comprehends as well, as is said, the elect that be departed, commonly called the kirk triumphant, and those who yet live and fight against sin and Satan will live hereafter.
Here's the metaphor I'm going to fall on right now. So I'm with you. Like, there's some parts of this that we've been going through where we're like, oh, this is so familiar. The flavor is right on. It's vanilla in the best possible way. That is, it is representative of orthodoxy. Like, if vanilla is orthodoxy, I guess, like, give me an orthodoxy cone. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's on there. But here's where I think maybe we can add a little bit to that metaphor is it's like taking that ice cream cone, which is vanilla, and like either you dip it or you put like sprinkles, or depending on where you're from in the world, jimmies on it. You know what I mean? It's like there's like something to it that you're like, well, this is vanilla, but there's like, oh, I got some texture in this bad boy, or there's some color to it that's a little bit different. Are you jimmies or sprinkles? Like, what is? I have no idea. What
I feel like that's going to be just as controversial of a question as when we get to that part about the children being comprehended in the faithful.
This is my setup. I'm trying to equalize them.
Yeah, we just called them sprinkles, I think, when I was growing up. But then when you moved out east, it became jimmies. Everybody called them jimmies.
Okay, but what are the sprinkles? What you have to describe them real quick.
Well, I know like the classical distinction I've heard is that the jimmies are the black and white ones and the sprinkles are the rainbow ones, but I wouldn't make that distinction. They're like little pieces of some sort of edible substance. They're not
confection.
Like sugar. Yeah, I'm not sure what they're made of, but
yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. So everybody's losing their minds right now. That's great. I think that's right on. I don't know as well because my wife is from Philadelphia originally, and she would call them jimmies. I think there is probably somewhere there's some catechesis on this that I never had with respect to like ice cream and the sprinkles thing. I think there is like a sprinkles creed. I don't know what it is. My wife loves sprinkles so much that back in the day when like AOL Instant Messenger was the thing and you created names like your handles, her handle was Sprinkle Fanatic. So anyway, that's just a quick testimony to her and she is awesome. So here's what I do think though is different. This is the sprinkle part of this is, and I'm curious for your perspective on this. Do you think this idea of invisible, visible church is like, if you just dropped yourself on the Lord's Day into like some kind of general evangelical church and you brought this up, do you think people understand or think about the distinction?
Yeah, I think in most instances, the average Christian in the pew probably doesn't have a good understanding of that distinction. And so they would either err to one side or the other. They would either fall into the error that the church is the physical place that I go, or is this particular group of people that I gather with on the Lord's Day, or they would err on the like, the building isn't the church, we're the church, and we're everybody. Like they would err on the spiritual side more so than anything else. So I don't know that I would have like a prediction of which direction they would fall. I think maybe most of your kind of like general Baptist flavored evangelical churches probably would fall more on the invisible church side. And then I think like people who are maybe more fundamentalist Baptist, and I'd say Baptist just because I think once you get into like more confessional catechetical, and when I say Baptist, I don't mean Reformed Baptist. All my 1689 people can just calm your jimmies down. I think like the fundamentalist Baptists probably emphasize the local church more
Yes.
to the exclusion of the invisible church, and maybe because some of them think they're the only church and there is no other church. And then the more general, broad evangelical Baptist-y kind of people would err the other direction.
I agree with that. I suspect that if you were to drop even that term, if you were to ask somebody what is the invisible church, that term, those combination of words might ring strangely in their ears.
Yeah.
Whether they could really articulate that. So this to me is like one of the actual lovely distinctions of Reformed theology. And basically, I think, like you said, Knox is in line with everything that we've talked about before countless times. That is that we have God who's founded one church, and that Jesus only has one bride, people, church, or body. Actually, I have this good friend who, whenever he signs an email, he always signs it one love, which I think is like one of the most amazing ways to like bring a salutation into an email. And in part, I think that's his expression of like what it means to be part of the kirk, part of the body of Christ, this unification. So our God doesn't have like two churches, he has one. And so this term invisible, which I think, again, like our labeling that, kind of almost codifying it, is so awesome because it's used to describe two distinct aspects of one church, or like maybe to say it slightly differently, the church is considered from two different perspectives. So it's not, of course, like they're two separate airtight categories with one group on heaven, another group on earth. Yeah. I would say contrary to that, and what you have here is there's this really great overlap between both categories. All genuine believers are members of the invisible church, whether they're living or in heaven, whether they're alive or dead. Not all professing Christians, however, are members of the visible church are going to be members of that invisible portion that we're talking about. Some people make a profession of faith and are baptized, are hypocrites. Such people do not truly believe in Christ. Thus, they're never truly united to him by faith and are not part of that invisible church. What I love about this is it just forces us, like all the other confessions, to reconcile with this idea, because like in the West, at least, I just don't think we think this way. Like we don't think about like the broad spectrum of the invisible church, like across time and space. So I was thinking about this in preparation for this podcast, and remembering that, my grandmother, who died in April of this year, I am united with her in this invisible church, that she and I are still together in the sense that like this transcends the spiritual reality of that church, is the fact that it exists in a real sense, almost like we were talking about the Lord's Supper, like not just spiritually, but exists in a real sense, and that she is part of it and I am part of it. And in that way, we are still bound together. It's not like a has been. She was part of the church. She is part of the church by that confession. So I think what I love about this is that distinction. And I think many of us would do better to be constantly pondering that and thinking through that. I'm glad that, of course, in all the confessions, I keep saying confections now because of our talk about sprinkles. In all our confessions, that this continues to come up. But I think that's undervalued in our modern context in speech, this idea of visible and visible. And let's not even get started about the Catholic Church, capital C, and how that can be misunderstood. Like we've moved away from this idea, and you're right, that most of us, I would say, know in the evangelical space that the church is not like explicitly the place that we meet. It's not explicitly a building, or it feels like an unsatisfactory answer. It's more than that. But how much more than that is, I think, this idea that it transcends time and space. And we get a lot of that here right from the jump.
Yeah. So that part of the Levitical law, this is going somewhere, I promise. That part of the Levitical law where they're like, if you vow a rash vow, then it's like better to not fulfill the vow than it is to do something stupid. So like I had a rash vow when I said we weren't going to talk about Doug Wilson, because this just shows everybody. I'm not going to, this is really more just a disclaimer, but I have to mention him in this disclaimer. This is just to show everybody that we don't prepare at all. Because if I thought ahead even 2 seconds about that statement, I would have not made it. So one of the main errors actually of the federal vision is they fail to properly distinguish between the visible and the invisible church. And the reason that this is such a problem is because it creates this overlap, and overlap's not the right word. It's even hard to kind of talk about this. It creates this situation where like you fail to properly distinguish between the differences in what we have here now on earth and what we will have in the coming kingdom. And so Doug Wilson would actually use terms like the eschatological church versus the historical church. And this is the reason I'm saying this as a disclaimer. There is actually some valid reason to think in those categories, in my opinion. but I'm going to go a totally different direction than the way that Doug goes. So if you're hearing this and you're going, wow, Tony seems to agree with Doug Wilson on this. I don't. I really don't. He goes a totally different direction. Back to my vow of I shouldn't say this. I'm going to try not to reference Doug Wilson anymore during the episode. I actually like to think about the distinction between the invisible church and the visible church, similar to the way I think about the individual Christian sanctification, right? Yeah. So the invisible church is what the church will be when all of the impurity and all of the corruption has been sanctified out of it. Right. And what we have here on earth is more similar to like the Christian's experience in the Christian's life, where yes, we are regenerated, we're holy, we're righteous, we're saints, we're justified, we're being glorified. All of those things are true, and they're ultimately and finally true, and they won't ever be not true. Yet the corruption still persists. And at the church now, this is why I like the difference between like the church militant and the church triumphant, like using some different language apart from visible and invisible, not because those words are bad, but because that particular way of talking about it has some baggage that I think runs into problems. But what the church is ontologically, or like you could think about this like the question of canon, right? When we talk about the canon of Scripture, Michael Kruger makes this point a lot. We talk about the canon of Scripture. There's the canon as it actually is, and that's only not only known by God, but it's defined and distinguished in its ontology. Its essence of what it is comes from the fact that God inspired works. So the canon of Scripture ontologically is all of those books that God inspired. Now, I don't believe this, but let's hypothetically say that somewhere along the line we figure out that like Philemon was written by some dude named Joe who hated Jesus, and this was somehow mocking the gospel. And let's pretend that we as a church decided like this isn't part of the Bible. That can't happen. It won't happen. It isn't going to happen. But just for the sake of argument, let's say that happens. We would have like the invisible canon that is defined by what God says and does. And then we'd have like this visible canon of like what we are able to ascertain based on like our evidence. Now, again, backing up, I don't believe that there are any books of the Bible that the Holy Spirit has allowed to be in the Bible that should not be there. And I don't believe there are any books outside of the canon that should be in the canon. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm just using it as an example. But the church, it's not so much about like these two distinct definitions of the church and two separate churches. It's about talking about what the church is from one facet and talking about what the church is from another facet. There is the invisible church or the church triumphant. I'll even say the eschatological church. I think that's a way to talk about it. If we're going to talk about what the church will be in the last day, the invisible church is more understood. And this is something that I think is really strong in here from Knox. The invisible church is really more about God's understanding of what the church is. And he makes that point. The invisible church is the true actual number of saints who have been, who are, and who will be. That's a really important piece, is that the Reformed tradition considers those who are to be born and will come and will be elect or are elect and will be saved and will be brought into the church, the actual church. That's the invisible church. It's all the saints throughout all ages across all time.
Right.
Genuine actual saints. The visible church is just that. It's what we see and what we experience and what we have in front of us. And so I think this kind of like distinction between like the experience we have as Christians who affirm that we are righteous and justified and holy, and we never will not be those things, yet we are not fully those things yet. That's the way I like to think about the invisible church. And people talk about it like Venn diagram or concentric circles. There's all sorts of ways to kind of like visualize or talk about this. And all of them have strengths and weaknesses. But thinking about it more along those lines of like the progression of what we have now to the final situation where and this is maybe a better way to talk about it than the eschatological versus historical church. Not just to avoid that language, but even just more in terms of the concepts. There is a situation where there's like these circles, and they're not the same thing. They are not identical. I would actually say there may be those, at least in this moment in time, for sure there are those who are part of the invisible church because they have not yet come to faith or have not yet joined themselves to a local body. who are part of the invisible church because they will at some point do that. They've been decreed and elected to do that. And then there's the part of the visible church that exists that is not elect and decreed. And the process of history, what God is doing in this, we'll call it the sanctification of the church, I guess, is those circles are coming into alignment. And in the last day and the final analysis, those circles will be one circle. They'll be one and the same thing. God's knowledge of who is elect and who is the invisible church and the actual visible body of saints will be the same exact body.
Right. Yeah, I think that's profound because in many ways, and I keep trying to avoid coming to this statement, we're just talking about God doing all the things again, like that he is actually the one involved in all the verbs. So sometimes we think of the church as we initiate its composition, its construction by our willingness to belong to it or by our volitional desire to participate in it. And Knox is like coming at us hard. Behind the scenes, I think, is a little bit like kind of subtle about this. That's saying, oh, that's not the case at all. And so it's a reminder again that like God is the one who builds his church. It is his church. So he is, and I could say it almost like this, I would say strongly, he defines its membership, of course.
Right.
So I love that, like Luther once said, he who does not truly believe does not belong to the Christian church. It's really that simple.
Right.
And who brings in that belief? Who is the one that's the progenitor and the provider of that faith? We would say it's God himself. And so as a result of that, when we think about this church, we're thinking both like the span of those who have believed, who have been given this gift of faith across all epochs. And then in addition to that, we're talking about the fact that right now, it's not about like as if we're not just talking specifically about like tares and wheat, as if like when you sit down on Lord's Day, try to figure out who is in and who is out.
Yeah.
It's not like a signaling. It's not trying to bring about this distinction merely because it would be interesting to know and who are the hypocrites and who are the ones that are truly believing and who are the ones that are here for meritorious living and just to feel better about life. It's not that about at all. And of course, investing your time and energy to try to discern that is a fool's errand of like the greatest degree. It's more about, I think, understanding that everywhere that Knox has brought us so far, the outworking of God's great work, his great salvific work, his work of love toward us, is to say that you belong and that he adopts you in, but he adopts you in. A child cannot be the one that actually brings forward the adoption papers. God does all this work. And then necessarily, and by definition, it means that the Christian is part of something to which is greater than themselves, but legitimately greater than themselves because of God bringing us into that family. So I love this about the church because what it means then is that our status and our place in this belonging is rock solid. It's rooted in who God is himself, all the things we talked about, I think, in like the last couple of episodes. And I think we have a tendency to miss that and then miss that, like our part in this, like the bigger grand story here is how God remembers us by bringing us faithfully into his church for all times, all seasons, all eternity. So I think you're right. Like I have no problem thinking about like the eschatological church, if by what we mean by that is that right now we get to experience in part something that will be perfected in eternity. And that perfection means that those who belong to it will be the ones who are the one true worshipers of the one true God, because the one true God has changed us and reoriented our lives and perspectives and our very being to free us from sin, death, and the devil so that we might come together side by side, shoulder to shoulder with others who are equally changed to worship him. And if that's what we experience in like Revelation 21, for instance, why should we not expect it on the Lord's Day? That we're experiencing that in some part, maybe it's just the tip of the iceberg, but in some way with some signal that this is exactly what God is doing in our lives. The church does this and God does this in the church. So I do think it's like tremendously critical. That seemed like hyperbolic. It's very critical. That's also hyperbolic. It's critical that I think we really come to invest ourselves in understanding that this church is big. I think often, I was reading Ecclesiastes recently, and I've just been thinking often about this idea that all of us are like so quickly forgotten in the temporal space.
Yeah.
If you think about your great-great-grandparents, it's wonderful if you know their names. It's probably even like more exceptional if you know like what they did and what they were like. And we're talking about like just 2-3 generations away and just forgotten. The fact that God never forgets, and one of the ways, and I don't mean to be like too obtuse about this, but I think one of the ways in which he proves to us that he doesn't forget that he remembers us is by demonstrating and illustrating and putting forward this idea of the invisible church. That once part of God's family as he saves you, always part of God's family. And that idea of him remembering Noah in the ark and him remembering his people is the same way that's carried forward in the way he brings this kirk together so that we're always remembered, that his love is made consummate and expressed, it's manifest in this binding together, as you said, of the promise. This is promise language, right?
Yeah.
That we're part of this group of which our membership is absolutely secure and which we can never lose. This is, like, I think, just an expression of that covenant promise of remembering.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll come back to this when we get to, there's a couple chapters coming up that will revisit this. But one of the things I want to make sure I get it out here before we end the show here today is this distinction, this visible, invisible distinction, or maybe we'll call it substance administration distinction, is absolutely vital to what the Reformed historically have done. And on this show, I know that our friend Reginald is tying a note to a brick and getting ready to throw it through my window right now, or to sick the Heidel dog on me. On this show, in this particular corner of the Reformed internet, our Reformed Baptist brothers and sisters who are from the 1689 confession, I'm not throwing any shade at them. I don't have any qualms about calling them Reformed. However, the historic Reformed, talking about like capital R Reformed / Presbyterian bodies that affirm paedobaptism and more or less Presbyterian polity or Reformed polity, this distinction between the visible and the invisible, or the substance of the administration, is absolutely vital. It maps up and it drives so much of what's going on in the theological system that to get it wrong is really important, or to get it wrong is really, really problematic. You're going to miss a lot of really important things. And so it's important, and this ties back to what we said about Knox, how he kind of defines the church as like the heirs to the promise, or those who have inherited the promise, or the subject of the promise. There's a sense in which he is saying that the invisible church is those who it's not a sense, he's explicitly saying that those who are the invisible church are those who by faith take hold of and receive the promise of God in Christ Jesus for all that means, all the benefits that brings. There's another sense, and he's not as explicit about this as some of the other Reformed confessions are. There's another sense, though, where there is an outside or an external manifestation of those who outwardly receive the promise and do not receive that by faith. And this ties in and maps up to, and we're going to find out when we get to the sacraments, this maps up to what we call the substance administration distinction. There are those who participate in the administration of the church, the administration of the covenant of grace, which I would say are one and the same thing. It's just two ways to talk about the same thing. Right. There are those who participate in the administration of the covenant of grace. That is the outward signs, the outward elements, the outward participation. Those are one and the same body of people who participate in the visible, outward, administrative church. Then there are those who take hold of those promises and make them their own by faith. Those are those who are and will ultimately be one and the same as the invisible church. And those groups are not identical. They're not the same. And so we have to talk about it in just very brief. We'll spend more time on the baptism question when we get to the chapter on baptism. So if you're here to hear me bash on Baptists, first of all, you're not going to get that. But second of all, maybe you'll get a little bit of that when we get to the baptism section. I'm not going to bash on Baptists, but I'll be critical of Baptists. This statement that he makes here about the children being comprehended with or being considered with the faithful. Let me pull it back up here so I can get the exact phrase here. He says, of course, I didn't find it ahead of time, but he says, those in time come to him, avow his doctrine, and believe in him, right? So he's talking about those who actually unite themselves to Christ or are united to Christ by faith. And it says, we comprehend the children with the faithful parents. And what he's meaning in that, and there's disagreement on this in the Reformed world. So, and I don't know for sure that I'm getting Knox right here. I haven't studied in depth, but he seems to be affirming kind of the same idea that like we make a judgment call about children. We consider them in line with their parents. That is not, absolutely hear me, absolutely not to say that a child is saved or elected or chosen in the invisible church sense because They are born to a set of parents. If anything, we might actually reverse that relationship and say an elect child is given to elect parents, and that it is the outside of the norm situation that an elect child is given to non-elect parents. That's outside of the norm. That's why we see, by and large, I know there are conversions. I was a conversion of this nature, but there are conversions with children whose parents are not believers who become believers, and oftentimes they bring their family to faith, or their family comes to faith through that testimony. But the norm throughout the history of the church, by and large, has been that Christian parents make Christian babies who grow up and make more Christian babies, and this is it just is the way that it has been historically. That's not a comment on whether that's good or bad or any theological statement. That just is a fact of what the church has been historically. And I would actually say is still a fact historically of what the church is now, by and large. So I think it's important to at least get that out there because it's part of this chapter. And it is a through line throughout the whole confession here that those who are inheritors to the promise are also those who receive salvation. But there are those to whom that promise is extended who more or less reject the promise. Right. Cain was extended the same promise that Abel was. He heard, I'm sure he heard the same promise told to him by his parents that the serpent would be crushed by the seed of the woman, right? Someday God's going to make this right. And he's going to bring all of us back into the fold. We're all going to go back to Eden. Right. I'm sure that promise was shared with him. He was just as much extended that promise. And God even, in a sense, extends that promise to him. And this is anthropomorphic language, but he says, will you not do well? Like he even like kind of reinforces that promise in the midst of the judgment when he criticizes him for basically like coming to him with an unfaithful sacrifice. So this through line of what the church is as the heirs of the promise, it's not absent from this chapter, even though it may not be as explicit. And we're going to see this go through the rest of the confession in really interesting ways.
I think no matter what you believe, whatever your convictions are in that particular era of baptism, what you should find is that we can all agree that the church is a reflection of that promise of God, that God is bringing about that promise by way of the visible and invisible manifestation of that church, like on the earth right now, temporal. And then that eschatological church is going to be like its full consummation at some point in time. I would still say that I think what you said there is helpful for everybody to think about in terms of then the challenge of how do you understand that promise? Where are the boundaries, so to speak, of that promise? And we all have to contend with working out it. You know, we can't get away from the fact that we need to understand what is the purpose of baptism, how does that play into salvation? Like all these things are on the table for us to evaluate. You're all reasonable people and you ought to do that. And we're going to come back to it, like you said later on. I think the thing that we can all rejoice in right now is that God provides his church. That's like an amazing a blessing, like just full stop. Like I would do this thing and then draw this people together. I often, when I'm hanging out with my own church family on the Lord's Day, I especially find this if you're working with people, if you've ever worked with any kind of people, you find so amazing the difference in perspectives and experiences. And what's funny is you might think that it gets easier in the church. And sometimes I think it's more difficult in the church. And maybe this is like something as simple as like to what we were just talking about, picking out a color paint for the nursery, or something about picking a strategy, or what is the mission of the church, or how are we going to pray, or what are we going to do? All this stuff, you'll find that people have all these glorious and diverse perspectives. And I've often said in the midst of that, especially because like most of the time I'm using my own gifts in the church in the area of music ministry. Music is one of those areas where people have like strong opinions. And these are all like people who love Jesus and want to serve him and worship him through music. And you'll find like even in our orchestration or in the arrangement of music, people have different opinions. And sometimes I'll say in a moment where everybody is having, let's say like we're having a robust discussion, not arguing, but we're having a robust discussion about something, even like how many beats there are in a particular measure, where I think, and I'll say, isn't it amazing? Like there's no earthly reason we should all be together right now. We're far too different. We come from different perspectives. We come from different families, different geographic locations, totally different experiences. Our turns of mind are so different. And yet we feel at the end of that, even as we get up from those experiences, it's a bit like even if you have a conflict with your own family, you recognize at the end of that, we are still bound together. And so while maybe even sometimes our harmony might be disrupted, our identity is never compromised. It never gets sacrificed. It's impermeable. It's immutable who we are. That is how I feel about the church. And the fact that we can feel that way because God has placed it into our lives as a reality. In other words, our heart and our mind are united in this fact that God draws us together because it is God who is the drawing, is evidence that his promise remains active in our lives, that there's a reality to it, that he brings it into play. And so this idea that I think Knox brings forward is one which says, you know what? You're used to thinking about families in a natural sense. And if you go to your church and you look around and you think, again, there's no earthly reason we should be together, I have to believe that Knox would say you're entirely correct, because what you have here is a supernatural bond that God has effected by way of his promise. And that promise brings about this real quantity of action whereby you come together and you live and you rub shoulders and you interact, you speak, you pray together, you bear up your burdens with one another, you rejoice with one another. But God has done all of these things. And so once again, we find that he's setting the rules, he's setting the parameters. And if we try to do this ourselves, it would just collapse underneath the weight of our own organization. But because God does it, this is why we can say, again, there's no reason we ought to be together. And I'll be honest, like sometimes I think about that more predominantly than others times, because I'm just like, wow, the fact that we are all here is incredible. I mean, have you ever had that thought? Like, do you ever think about that? Like, just practically speaking, as you're interacting with your brothers and sisters?
Yeah. I mean, I think actually like that feeling is more acute when you're in a small church, because you're rubbing shoulders with the rest of the church in a more direct way. So there were often times, and I loved my church family at the previous church we were at, but it was very small. And there was often times where I'd look at it and go, these people have nothing in common. Like we have nothing in common. There's nothing in, and then I'd be, oh yeah, there is one thing in common.
Yeah.
We have one thing in common, and it's the most important thing. Right. So like I can be patient and gracious and loving to people that I may not otherwise have any interaction with. There's people, and this is true in every church that you go to. So this is not exclusive to that church, but I think it's more acutely felt in a small church. There are people in your church that you would never associate with outside of your church for natural reasons. Like you wouldn't spend time with them. You wouldn't be friends with them. You probably wouldn't run in the same circles. You just wouldn't. But because of who we are in Christ and because of what Christ does, we do, and we are, and we're associated with them in the most intimate way possible, in a spiritual fellowship that is, it transcends race, it transcends geographical boundaries, transcends gender or sex or whatever the word is that we're using these days, and it transcends time. There are people in history that not only will we never actually interact with because they're dead, or we're going to be dead before they get here, but we would never encounter them. We would never engage them. We would probably be their enemies, right? This is going to be like a really bombastic statement, but like there are people who in other times and eras we would be at war with and would be physically my enemy on the battlefield that I would probably be trying to kill, right? We'll assume just war on that one. But like there are people in those situations, and all of that may still be true, yet they're still my brother in Christ. And so that's a reality that I think is worth thinking through and wrestling through and really, really pondering. And Knox really forces us to do that with these definitions that he's giving us.
Yeah, I think that's something that's great, though. Again, I think is like so uplifting, encouraging, is to think about even the people that you've loved, that you've lost, that are in the Lord, knowing that, again, like it's not just like they're in a foreign country separated from you, like far away and dislocated, but this idea, which is the truth, that God has remembered them, that they are alive in Christ, their souls are with him, and that means that they are still part of his church. Yeah. You know, like it's not like we will wait for all of us to be reconstituted, so to speak, in our physical bodies, and then God will say, like, here, you're all together. Isn't that great? But that we are worshiping him together, even now. And so that we talked about this before, I think, when we come to the Lord's Day, all that we're doing, and this is like, I think, a small ask of God, so to speak, is that he says, set aside this day 1 and 7 to come and gather. And in that day, on the 1 and 7, the holiday that he creates, that he sustains by the word of his power, what we're doing is participating in the kind of worship in the permanent church that's happening in his presence at all times for all times. Yeah. And so what we're seeing is, again, just like a sliver, it's like looking through the keyhole. And I don't know. I just find that to be remarkable. Not only is that like just distinctive with respect to world religions writ large and different philosophical perspectives, like you're not going to find that anywhere else, but it's also this idea, again, that we're together, and that togetherness is all of us. Yeah. And even those who are departed. And that is like so unique. And I think that should fire us up in our worship. It should give us greater appreciation for who God is and the word of his power in saving his people to bring them into harmony across planes of existence, as it were. And he does that in the church. And John Knox is just saying, don't forget. And then when he brings about his statement about children, he's pushing that out even broader and saying, like, don't forget, ponder this, think about this, come to terms with this, process this. This idea of the church is so large and so outside of you, so transcendent, as it were, and yet immanent in your midst, that it must and necessarily does reflect the character of God. And so I think, again, this should fire us up to think about, like you and I have like this really, I think appropriately so, because I'm biased, high view of the Lord's Day.
Yeah.
And for me, that's always been about because of what the church is, right, and because of who God is in his church.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, I think we should probably put a pin in it because we're on minute 63 of our 45 to 50 minute podcast. And this is just what it is. We should just stop saying that the podcast is an hour long. If you have been edified by this episode, not you, Jesse. I mean, I hope you have been, but I'm not really talking to you.
I've been super edified.
If you, as the listener who isn't Jesse, have been edified by this podcast, we would encourage you to share this episode with a friend. We really should start like doing this at the beginning of the episode. That's probably like good podcasting skills to like put the call to action at the front.
We do what we want.
We do what we want. This is our show. We can do what we want. But if you've been edified by the show, if you think that this is something that's worth listening to, we would ask you to share this episode with someone else. The best way for us to get this theology out and to have more people involved and to have more people in the conversation and more reason to continue doing this is if there are people joining the Brotherhood, and they do that primarily through listening to the show. The other thing is you can join our Telegram channel. You can go to Telegram, t.me/Reformed Brotherhood, and you can hop in there and lurk a little bit if you want to look around. But that's a great place to be able to sort of like work out the practical implications of this. We had a fairly lengthy, it was lengthy partially because people were hopping in and out of it, but it was lengthy because it was also an in-depth conversation about baptism and the difference between 1689 federalism and kind of more historical, not historical like 1689 isn't, but more like mainstream Westminster or Reformed continental covenantalism, right? Federalism. We had a really great discussion, and there's a lot that plays into that. The substance administration distinction, differences in what the understanding of the covenant of grace versus the covenant of works, and what is the new covenant, what is the old covenant. All of that is stuff that we talk about on a regular basis in there. So if you like what you're hearing on the show and you're looking for more, you're going to get more every week, but the best way to get more is just to join that channel and to just interact with other people who like the same thing.
Also, can I say, the whole thing about that channel is if all those words sound foreign to you, if you were thinking, I must have an advanced degree in theology or some kind of learning or lots of experience to hang out and to chat, that is wrong. Come and hang out. I think the beauty of what we're talking about here is that there's so many different people interacting. Honestly, the Telegram is not the church. However, it is a reflection that God draws lots of people onto himself. And this is just a place for lots of people whom God has drawn onto himself to hang out. So don't be intimidated by any of that. Come and spend some time hanging out. In fact, like, that's partly what we've learned, I think, on this episode, is that God draws all kinds, all manner of people, all mankind in that sense to himself. And what he does is he creates a place in the church, the local church, the place for you to go and to worship, for you to be. And so if you're not in one of those places in your own local community, you ought to be. That's the whole jam of this thing. In addition, I think we've also learned that Tony loves salmon shorts. And for basically as long as he's been alive, that's been his thing. And so I personally, I like to see him in more salmon shorts.
I'm trying something right now. Jesse and I have been using Zoom to record our podcast, and Zoom transcribes things. There's AI that you can ask questions of and say, why does Tony like salmon colored shorts? Let's see what it says.
I'm equally curious about this answer. Processing. Yeah. How much time? Obviously it's thinking hard because it wants to give like this proper answer.
It says, based on the context provided, there's no evidence that Tony actually likes salmon-colored shorts. This appears to be a joke or misunderstanding that developed during the conversation. He tells a story about finding out the shorts were actually pink, not khaki, as he had thought, due to his colorblindness. Wow. So I would just like to say, Thank you for making fun of my disability, Jesse. I appreciate it.
No, here's the thing. Maybe I should say this for next week. I'm affirming it because I think what it's done is it made you. Let's think of it this way. This is a lot. I mean, we have another 2 hours to go, right?
Yeah,
okay. So I'm just going to open up this conversation. Like, think about the people, the kids, that the little boys that might've been transformed by your boldness in wearing these salmon colored shorts, because that is a statement. And you were just out there making that statement.
Yep. It's true. It's true.
So I have a pair of salmon shorts, which I also love. And to my knowledge, they are actually salmon, but now everything is lost.
I feel like I have salmon shorts coming in the mail at this point from someone. I don't know who. That's not an invitation. I can just feel that it's going to happen.
An invitation.
Maybe like a Christmas present or something. And it's not.
It's definitely an invitation. Would you just be so kind to give the listeners your physical address real quick? So if you listen, loved ones, if you have salmon shorts that you would like to send, Tony would love to wear them. Go ahead, Tony. Would you just share your physical address?
Hey, if John Owen can rock the red boots,
that's what I'm saying.
Citation needed. Then Tony can rock the salmon shorts. I guess.
That's what I'm saying. Well, very lastly, can I say on that topic? So I was on a kick recently trying to find reference to that. I can only find reference to the red boots. And apparently so here's what I've narrowed down to. They were red Spanish leather boots. I don't know how somebody knows that, but I'm not finding them in the first principle sense or in like the original documentation. So if somebody can find somewhere, or maybe, I don't know, like John Owen had like a receipt where he bought them. If you have that copy of that receipt, would you please send it to us at info@reformedbrotherhood.com, because it's kind of a game changer. And we at one point had somebody say that they would create some John Owen depiction if we could find like original source material that he in fact had the red boots. It's very common among, I would say, like secondary sources, but nobody has quoted, and I've gone in deep on this rabbit hole, the source. So this is the challenge. Find it.
I feel like in the age of AI, if it's out there, we would have found it by now. Have you tried asking Perplexity? Because Perplexity nailed the difference between Jimmy's and Sprinkles for me.
Oh, really?
It did. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. But here's the thing. Like, I feel like this is more than just like the old, like weird attributed quote to like Spurgeon of like, I've learned, or like there's hard, or what is it, like challenge and everything except eating pancakes, or like I've learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages. Like, I feel like it's not that.
Yeah.
There's more legitimacy here to the red boots. There's definitely more. I just need the receipt. So if somebody has that, just let us know. info@reformedbrotherhood.com.
Well, Jesse, I feel like we should wrap it up. And I don't know, maybe we don't even say our tagline, because I'm sure everybody stopped listening like 10 minutes ago. But until next time, for the one person who's still listening, honor everyone.
I love the brotherhood.
What if I'm far from home? Oh, brother, I would hear you call. What if I lose it all? Oh, sister, I would help you out. If the sky comes falling down for you, there's nothing in this world I